Hi friends, welcome to Sybil's Lab of Cartomantics. I'm Amelia and I'm one half of the lab, and I'm coming to you solo today to do a little hashtag VR to a video that I actually originally saw over on Jay at Iridescent Tarot on her channel, but the original video is from Mermaid's Dream Tarot, and this is the hashtag Thoughtful Tarot. I loved these questions. I feel like they're so in line with the video that Danielle and I just put out together, all about tarot practice and the evolution of that and what that is and what that means, which I'll be sure to link down below along with Jay's video and the original video, so you can go view that if you haven't already. But it's also just so in line with a lot of the things that I'm thinking about for myself and where I want to take my personal practice with tarot. And I love thinking out loud, and this is a great opportunity to do that. So let's get started. So the first question is, why do you use tarot and oracle? And I think I've answered this here on our channel before in some of the various videos that we've put out about this type of stuff, but that is like the reason why I use tarot and oracle is always changing and evolving and adapting to meet me wherever I am in my life. And I think, if I were to look at like the broad picture of why I use tarot and oracle, like that's part of it. That's maybe that's the big reason why. I use it because it can meet me where I am, and it can be such a boon to whatever it is that I need at that moment in my life. So if I need a creative outlet, tarot can do that. If I need a place to explore some more challenging feelings or thoughts that I'm having, tarot can do that. If I need a soft landing place, tarot can do that. Like, it can do anything. And the more I've worked with it over the years, the more I've realized its limitlessness. And the more I notice, like when I do step away, I notice its absence. I know we definitely talked about this in our last video on practice and what is a tarot practice, but in more than one point in my life, I have stepped away from it for one reason or another, not for any long amount of time. Usually it's a couple months tops, but I notice it missing. I notice it not, I can feel a hole that needs to be filled. And I think that the elasticity and the possibility of tarot to do whatever it is that I need it to do as a tool is why it will always just kind of be there. It's like second nature at this point to turn to it for various things. Yeah, I think that's my answer. So the second question is, what has changed in your deck taste? I think if I were to really consider this question, I think my deck taste has become more expansive over the years. It's like the opposite of really narrowing in on this is what I like and I'm not going to venture outside of that. I've become so much more exploratory in my taste and being open to all of the different ways that tarot can present. So my first deck, and I've definitely talked about this, was the Hermetic Tarot. It's a very serious, it's black and white, it's Golden Dawn based. There are alchemical glyphs and astrological associations. And it's, if you could think of a deck that feels like the seriousness of tarot, this is that deck. And I think I got that deck as my first deck is because it felt like tarot needed to be something really serious and there wasn't room for something a little more playful. And I think over the years, I have definitely pulled back from that. but it's not an either or. It's not, it can be serious or it can be playful. It's yes, it is a both. And I think I've like grown over the years to accept and be open to all of the different presentations of tarot. And my taste reflects that. Like if you open up my tarot cabinet, I have a big cabinet in my bedroom where I keep all my tarot decks. It is such a wide variety in there. There's color, there's like beautiful decks, there are kind of quirky decks, there's historic, there's modern. I mean, it covers the gamut. And I think because I want to know all of the ways that tarot can be. Like there is a tarot for every mood, and my moods cover everything, can span across many genres and flavors. And I love the idea that tarot can kind of fit into whatever mood and thing that I'm on at the moment. And like really letting tarot be whatever it is, depending on who created it, right? And the third question is, what has changed in your tarot practice? You know, I think when I first started reading tarot and when I first started practicing tarot, I thought that it had to look a certain way. Like there needed to be candles. I had to like make a circle and, it had to feel like this very sort of focused and serious thing. And like there is a time and a place for that. But my tarot practice has evolved to consider to allow for different types, for it to look a different way than that. So for example, my tarot practice sometimes is sitting in the carpool line waiting to pick up my kid and pulling a few cards. My tarot practice sometimes looks like engaging with tarot in an artistic way and using it to inspire artistic expression. Sometimes my tarot practice looks like telling stories and exploring and evaluating the own stories that I'm telling myself. Like sometimes it looks like journaling. Sometimes it looks like a full moon reading. I think if anything, my tarot practice has gotten bigger. And one of the things that I love about tarot and the practice of tarot is that it really can be any size and shape that you need it to be. Hence my answer to the first question. And I think when I started practicing tarot, I thought it had to look one specific way. And I think I was really limiting myself. I love that I have gotten to a place where tarot can be whatever it is that it needs to be, whatever it is that it wants to be, right? Okay, so the first question is, what has not worked for you? And I think over the years, kind of trying to force myself to practice or study tarot in a specific way, like putting too many expectations and boxes and lines around tarot has really not worked for me. I struggle with structure and I struggle even when I self-impose structure and say, I am going to study this aspect of tarot and it is going to look like every day I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. That usually lasts a week if I'm lucky. And trying to put some sort of like rigid structure around tarot and what kind of practice I want and what kind of study I want to engage in with tarot has really, like, that's usually when I fall off, frankly, is when I try to put these sort of inflexible expectations around my engagement with tarot, as opposed to putting something really loose in place, if anything at all, and letting it kind of go where it goes. And I guess that answers the question number 5, which is what is working for you right now? And I think that's it. Like letting the muse be the muse and following her wherever she leads. And being willing to say, like, hey, this is a practice or an expectation I put on this season of life. It's really not, I'm not feeling it right now, or it's not fitting in the time that I have. It's whatever way, it's just not working, and letting myself kind of put that down and walk away from it without any sort of guilt or feeling like I'm not doing tarot right, or I'm not doing enough, or whatever. Yeah, and just following that path wherever it leads and not feeling like it needs to look a certain way. All right, question 6 is, what practice are you excited to delve into? And I actually have a video planned about this, but I am right now, like, and I talked about this in our fall practice video, which we did, I think, like back in September. But I have been working on engaging with tarot, speaking a visual language, if that makes sense. So instead of looking at tarot cards and engaging with them from like the verbal center of my brain, like the linguistic words center of my brain, really engaging with the visual language of tarot and responding in a visual language. And that has looked in like many different ways. That has looked like creating art around a tarot reading. That has looked like doodling, like almost like a hieroglyphic response to a tarot reading. That has also looked like visual imagining in my head. And I feel like I am barely cracking the surface with that. And the kind of more I go with it and the deeper I go with it, the more excited and engaging I'm finding it. And I'm finding it's like bleeding into other areas of my life too. Really thinking about and engaging with the idea of looking and seeing the world around me and within me, and not needing to place, some sort of like easily verbally communicated meaning on everything that I see and take in, but like kind of skipping over that part and engaging with the feeling part of myself. That probably sounds crazy. I have a whole video planned to talk about that, so be on the lookout for that. But yes, so really engaging with tarot as a visual language and a tool for developing my proficiency with visual language and speaking, but communicating through picture. Both with myself and like kind of in an external way. Okay, next question. What practice has grown old for you? I would say in this moment, a like daily draw type of practice feels a little bit, it doesn't get me excited to sit down with a deck of cards. I have had daily draw type practices on and off over the years. There have been times when it's been wonderful, and there have been times when it's felt just a little like monotonous. And here's the thing, I'll say right in this moment, something like that feels a little bit stale to me. A month from now, a year from now, years, any length of time from now, that could absolutely change and be exactly what I need and want to engage in. But I think, just pulling a card, journaling about it, it feels, I don't know, it just doesn't get me excited. And it makes me less likely to pick up a deck of cards for any kind of personal practice. Yeah, and I think, again, that just goes back to, like, tarot, like, my, like, perception of the practice of tarot really expanding and growing and getting larger, because yeah, they're like, in acknowledging that, this practice that worked for me at one point in my life just isn't working at the moment. But it might one day. Again, you never know. Okay, so next question is, what are your plans for your deck collection? I don't think I have any plans. I try to grow that collection mindfully. And by that, I mean really asking myself, before I purchase a deck, like, is this something that I feel like could add to my practice or just like my perception of tarot? Do I feel like this can do something really interesting for me? That's not always the case. Sometimes I get like swept up in, oh, this is new and I'm excited about it. Sometimes I get swept up in pretty pictures, although I think that is a mindful way to engage with tarot. It's just like maybe a little bit different. Yeah, I think, I like always am after the idea of engaging mindfully, but yeah, I don't have any plans. I don't, I guess if anything, my plan for my deck collection is to not feel guilty or feel like I have to like place any parameters around it for myself. I find that for myself, at least, it's so much easier to engage mindfully with stuff like that if I don't place any hard boundaries around it. It's almost like there's this idea of like engaging with like sugary foods, of like, if you don't make it this thing that becomes a reward after you eat your dinner, then it becomes easier to kind of be like, no, I just don't really want to right now. And I think that's definitely me with decks. If I try to say like, okay, no, by this month I'm not buying any tarot decks, or this year or whatever, like that itch gets really hard to ignore. But if I just kind of say like, okay, if something comes up, it comes up, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, then they come and they go. I find I have like arcs, like I have seasons of wanting to bring a lot in and like really put my feelers out there, and then I have seasons of just wanting to play with what I have and engage with that. And I have found that it's best to just let myself do that. All right, so what is one challenge you would like to give yourself? I'm not very good at this. I don't do well with challenges. I will say my daily challenge, I guess you could say, to me is every day I want to pick up a deck of cards and do something with it. Whether that be looking at the pretty pictures, whether that be, pulling a spread or a tableau and doing a reading for myself, whether that be reading for somebody else, whether that's learning, so some sort of like deck study situation, whatever it looks like that day. My goal is to pick up a deck of cards every day and do something with it. Something that feels meaningful and something that feels like I am going to come out of the other side of my time with that deck of cards better, right? Or maybe not even better, but just different, right? Like it is going to something affecting with a deck of cards. Yeah, and that's it. Like, I think if I did any more for myself, I would not want to do it. I would just run for the hills. I'd say, nope. I think it is pretty obvious by now. If you're familiar at all with kind of neurodivergent thinking or anything like that, I absolutely struggle with demand avoidance, and with myself I have just learned not to place demands. Even if I sit down to do like a tarot, like an Instagram tarot challenge, so like here's a question for every day, I last about 4 days before I'm like, these questions are perfectly fine, but because I've told myself this is what I have to follow every day, I just don't want to do it. So as loose structure, loose expectations, and that is pick up a deck and do something with it. All right, question 10 is, what is a deck trend you cannot get behind? And I think this is the one question that I really kind of thought about before sitting down to do this video. I think for me, a deck trend, it's not even a trend so much as just a general, what I at least perceive as like this general attitude maybe towards tarot, which is that like Rider-Waite-Smith is the end-all be-all systems of tarot, and that anything outside of Rider-Waite-Smith is difficult to read, impossible to read. I don't, this idea, this like notion of rejecting things that don't fit easily within some sort of recognizable Rider-Waite-Smith tarot system. I don't know. I just think, and here's the thing, there was a point in my life when I saw decks that were like pip decks that engaged some sort of like other type of Golden Dawn language, or even that just like stepped outside of that altogether and did its own thing. When I looked at those decks and I was like, that feels scary, that feels impossible, or even I placed some sort of like value judgment on it of saying like, that's not tarot. And I have learned how wrong I was and how much I was limiting myself. And so I think I would love to see some like a little bit more openness to things beyond specific, or to representations of these 78 cards beyond the like very familiar and prolific Rider-Waite-Smith. That is like one point in history. The creation of that deck was one point in history that came after like hundreds of years of this deck existing. And I love the like thinking about it historically, that tarot evolved over hundreds of years to like the Rider-Waite-Smith. And I love considering the idea that we have Rider-Waite-Smith and we've got like hundreds more years of evolution for tarot, like of tarot evolution that can take place. And I don't want it to stop there. I want it to continue to evolve and expand and go beyond a specific representation of the cards. I hope that answers that question. But I would also love to know, like, what are your thoughts about that? Because that's a conversation that I would love to engage with people on. All right, final question is, which types of decks would you like to see more of? And this absolutely piggybacks off of my answer to the previous question, which is that I would love to see decks that do their own thing outside of already existing systems of tarot or traditions of tarot. I would love to see decks that take the idea of 78 cards with some sort of like structure to them. So we've got like majors and we've got suits and court cards within those suits. And I would love to see more decks that just like take that idea and run with it and make their own representation that's outside of things that we've already seen. So like I have some examples here of just what I was able to pull quickly. This is the Tarot del Fuego. This is a deck by Fournier. This kind of, I don't even know what system you would consider this deck to fall into, but I feel like it's kind of doing its own thing. There's a little bit of Rider-Waite-Smith influence here. There's also some Marseille influence, especially in the majors. And then there's like just very much its own thing. And I love that. I love seeing deck creators just break out of expectation of what we think tarot should be. Okay, so that's a good example. My beloved Voyager Tarot to me is a wonderful example of, oh, here are the backs. This is a collage deck by James Wanless. I think this is a great example of tarot that does its own thing. And isn't like, you don't look at this and go, that's a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck, or that's a Thoth based deck, or, you know, it is its own deck, but it's still tarot and it's still doing something exciting and fun and different. And it makes me think. Okay, so there's an example. And then the final example I have is the Wheel of Change Tarot by Alexandra Ganetti. Again, very much just going its own way with tarot. She's got a whole thing about the Wheel of the Year that's worked into this deck, and you can see some nods to, you know, the familiar Rider-Waite-Smith. She even talks in her book about like a Thoth influence to her cards. But then there's also this whole other element that isn't any of those things, and really takes its own perspective of the cards. So yeah, I would love to see more decks and creators, and I know there's more than just what I showed here, that really just do their own thing with the cards, that isn't just a clone or a representation of or like a themed representation of a deck that, you know, is already in existence. Also, more thoughtful and creative pip decks. I love a good pip deck. The Echo Tarot comes to mind as a very recent creative pip deck that is out on the market. I've talked about my love of Tarot des Ozarks. Let's see, the Mystic Psyche Tarot looks like it's a really fun and creative pip deck. The Magic Tarot by Fournier looks like a fun pip deck. But yeah, pip decks that have some sort of like intention behind them that does something really interesting with just representations of the suit symbols. I love a deck that does that. That's just super clever in that way. Okay, so I think that is where we're gonna leave this. This is a nice, kind of short and sweet one. I had so much fun answering these questions. Thank you to Mermaid's Dream Tarot for creating this hashtag, and thank you for Jay for bringing it to my attention. I would love to know your thoughts around some of these questions, or if you've made a response to this video, let me know so I can go watch it. Oh yeah, let's do a little card pool. Let's get out the Tarot del Fuego. This is a fun one. All right, so what question do we want to ask? I think the question I want to ask is, how can we let tarot meet us where we are? How can we let tarot meet us where we are? And I think I'm going to pull two cards. Okay, so we've got cups here. So we've got the Nine of Cups and the Page of Cups. And I love this idea here. It feels like there's this like letting go of control. So we've got the cups turned upside down, raining down, making the garden grow. And then we've got our page here almost like in all of this, you know, rain, this water that came and like surrounded, oh wait, where is she? Surrounded by all of these flowers that we see here in the bottom of the Nine of Cups. Like she really, it's like she stepped back from needing that control and let tarot grow her a garden, if that makes any sense at all. She she really let go of needing to force it to be any sort of way. And look, and like the reward like is just being surrounded by abundance and possibility and like a nice soothing bath. And I think part of that is just letting it do its thing, letting it water your garden, water the garden of your heart, your soul, your life, and stepping back and seeing what grows, instead of needing to kind of be specific and guide it to be a certain way, if that makes sense. I kind of am curious what the bottom card here is. So the bottom card is the Knight of Cups. And I think this is such an interesting representation, because here's this horse with a tree growing on top, standing inside of a cup that is clearly too small for it. And if we think of the bottom card as this sort of like, what is it not? Or how can we, like, what would we do that is not that? And I think it's like trying to force something too big into too small of a vessel, right? And here we have the vessels emptying out into a bigger area, into a bigger expanse. And we have this giant vessel here that we can really just get inside of and really enjoy our time within it. And so I think, yes, instead of trying to force it to fit into something and into a box that's really small, like tip it out and see where it goes, and having a mindset of curiosity and openness, and yeah, just diving into that with abandon. All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting with me this week for this video. And yeah, like I said, let me know what your thoughts are about some of this. I'd love to hear. And I will, of course, link videos that I mentioned, as well as the original video to this, decks that I showed here, and of course, where to find us on Instagram and our website where you can book us for a reading. But until next time, friends, I'll see you in the lab.